Good afternoon. Please take your seats. We are almost starting punctually on Finnish time. I'm sure there will be people joining us. Good afternoon again, member state colleagues, experts, our colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome here to our Europa Hall, those who are attending this event in person, and welcome to everybody following us online. I understand you are quite a big number as well. This event is to discuss the potential of the Finnish green and competitive industry. We have two angles to this. One is the potential for renewable green electricity production and all the possible industry downstream value chains that might be then coming as a result of this, on one hand. And on the other hand, of course, the wider European agenda on where are we heading with the Green Deal, with the Green Industrial Deal, with our competitive challenges, with our strategic autonomy, getting rid of dependencies, reducing fossil fuel burning, and so on and so forth. My name is Ismo Ulvila. I'll be your master of ceremonies for this event, and I promise I won't be taking much of your time. I will be giving the floor in a moment to our experts. But before I do, just a few words of the bigger picture of what the Commission has been doing and what the Commission intends to do, providing that the next Commission starts in a few days' time, as it is likely to be. As the Commission representation in Helsinki, we wanted to create this space to facilitate precisely the discussion on the Finnish perspective and the Finnish views on what are the opportunities of the next legislative mandate. We have received earlier this year altogether a number of 4 reports, one by Mr. Enrico Letta on the deepening and widening of the EU single market, on the EU's agricultural strategic future, by Mr. Mario Draghi on the European competitiveness, and by President Sauli Niinistö on resilience and how to prepare for the crisis. The one thing in common to these reports is the understanding that as the EU, we can't anymore continue business as usual in any of these sectors. And hence, I think that the time is now, and we have already seen in summer, in President von der Leyen's political priorities, in the Commissioner-designate mission letters, how these reports have been feeding in to the next Commission mandate. They have been providing already some ideas on how the EU has to tackle its challenges. And those challenges indeed are there. As a remark, what we heard just a little bit more than a week ago, the fresh report by the International Energy Agency, the World Energy Outlook, that notes and illustrates how fast, for example, China is decarbonizing and what is the scale of the clean technology potential in China. So if we want to stay competitive, if we want to stay as a global power that can leverage many things, we need to step up our game. And all this is reflected in those mission letters and political priorities, as I said. There are also different instruments that are being developed from the investment fund, from different policy proposals on how to accelerate the green investments. So this is going to be investment commission, as President von der Leyen said it in summer. And I'm sure that in the event we're going to be discussing some of those issues related to competitiveness, some of those issues relating to the markets, and also what would be the direction of travel of the regulation. So how is it going to work? We have 3 excellent speakers. Our keynote will be delivered by Mr. Dr. Petteri Laaksonen, who is Research Director of the Lappeenranta Technical University. He will be presenting the blunt numbers, what the numbers say about the potential and what could be then assumed from those numbers to be the potential for the industry transformation, part of the industrial transformation in Finland, and whether there are any lessons learned also for the European scale. And we have 2 prepared comments by 2 real experts. We have a Managing Director of the Finnish Energy, Mr. Jukka Leskelä, and we have the Chair of the Finnish Hydrogen Cluster, Mr. Simo Sainovirta, who will be commenting Petteri's presentation. And after that, we're going to have ample time for questions, comments. Those of you who follow us by the chat, you may also ask comments in the chat. Voila, let's get started. My time is up. Petteri, yours is starting. Take the floor.
Thank you very much. It's actually a pleasure to be here. And I hope, okay, change the page. Yes. Wonderful, thank you very much. So, I'm talking about the potential of electrification in Finland, but I'm talking about the industries altogether also. And I'm talking about the size of the change that is required, not only about the technologies that we need to do. That's our strategy there, that simple diagram. So we are very much focusing on Lappeenranta-Lahti Technical University on those issues, business based on energy transition, air, water, and emissions. So pretty simple strategy we have. We were noted as 15th best small university, small advertise here, by the Times Higher Education ranking. And what we're talking about here is about green electrification and power-to-X economy. And why we're talking about green electrification is a fact, because if you look at the numbers again, and for example, Fingrid's numbers, the increase of especially wind, but then also solar are so big that they are overtaking all the necessary investments in energy production, electricity production in Finland in coming years. The other issue here is that we have this vision, we have developed it together, but we are talking about altogether well-being, we are talking about security and resilience, and we are talking about climate. And we can solve these issues, all these issues at the same time. So we don't have to look at one corner, but we can look at them all. And we can create welfare by doing these things at the same time. Now I'm going into numbers, but this is the potential of Finnish renewable energy. And based on our research, which is sort of looking at the areas so that where you can put things and where you can't put things, restricting areas that are somehow inhabited or whatever, then based on that we have onshore wind potential, which is 1,650 terawatt hours. So yes, last year we had 79 terawatt hours in Finland as production. So only the onshore wind is about that size. And then you put on the top of that, you put that 1,300 terawatt hours of solar. We are talking about almost 3,000 terawatt hours of electricity. Based on our modeling, it's about 30% of the Europe's future electricity demand. So our potential is huge. At the moment, Fingrid has requests for connection for 1,100 terawatt hours worth. It's both wind and solar, including also the offshore wind at the moment. But let's look at what we could do with that. Again, if we look at our research, if we did all the refining of the bio-based CO2 from the pulp mills we would need 175 terawatt hours of electricity. That would actually make quite a lot of methanol out of that. So bio-CO2-based products. And just a guess, building the same amount of production of ammonia, 175 terawatt hours, which is almost 3 times as much we used last year, or 2 times. And then data centers, new data centers are coming to Finland, but then again, if industry electrification uses additional 80 terawatt hours, which was the amount of last year's production, we would come up with a figure of 450 terawatt hours. And if the total is 1,000, for example, or 1,100, we still have a lot of space to do more. So basically, we can do everything. We can produce hydrogen, we can produce electricity, we can produce ammonia, we can produce methanol, we can produce all of these things, and still there is free electricity potential to be used. And that means that we have a lot of sort of room for new industries also in Finland, using cheap electricity. And now the biggest challenge is actually this fossil emissions. We need to get rid of those. And at the moment, the challenge is in industries. We can see what's happening in transportation and so on. There's a route, but what happens with the industries, it's not clear. And the main issue is how do we decarbonize the production of the industries? So this is sort of the sort of key of the story. How do we actually utilize this potential and competitive industry, or create competitive industry into Finland, so that we create profitable business, significantly reduce fossil emissions, and improving the safety and security at low cost? This is doable. If we look at the industrial transition, I have 2 cases. One is steel industry, the other one is chemical industry. Both very important for Finland. And please ask questions if something happens, because this is a bit complicated. This is simple, this is SSAB case, but it's more complicated when we go into chemical industry. The first thing is that in order to actually do hydrogen reduction at Draghi plant, we would need 600 megawatts worth of continuous production of electricity. So it's about 4.8 terawatt hours altogether electricity. That's not very much compared to the last year's 80 terawatt hours of production in Finland, 5%, something like that. But how do we do this with green electricity? First of all, we use onshore wind, which is the cheapest, and solar power, and actually do so that the producers of wind and solar produce also hydrogen. So they actually do hydrogen to pipeline to storage. And what happens is that they actually take away of their risk in electricity prices. Because if you do all the production into the storages as hydrogen, then you actually put additional profit on top of the production cost, but there's no sort of risk in electricity prices at all. It goes into the storage. And what it would require, it's about 250 turbines of wind power. It could be also solar power at the same time, but annual production with that could come up with that 4.8 terawatt hours. Now that storage of production, which is produced at the wind farms, the storage is actually balancing then the variable production of electricity and the variable usage of hydrogen. Because it's not actually baseload usage of hydrogen, but there are differences in demand of hydrogen as well. So there needs to be a storage. So there will be a hydrogen network from these wind farms to Draghi, and then large hydrogen rock storage facility. Yeah, and that means that it can actually provide the continuous production, continuous with variations, of course. And it's not iron ore reduction, but there are also other needs of the energy in that. The fact is that if we went on this route, the price premium is approximately 25%. So actually the selling price of the steel is 25% more than today. If we look at then the emission side, Rahe is one of the biggest emission points in Finland of fossil emissions, 8% of Finnish fossil emissions. And if we calculated that cost with last summer's prices, that would cost actually 321 million euros additional cost if they had to pay the ETS cost. Now they don't have to pay that at the moment because there are these free admissions of ETS. But if you look at in 2032, there is no more this free opportunity. So if we estimate that it goes to a bit higher than 70 euros per tons CO2 ton, then we talk about 500 million euros annual cost in the cash flow calculation. So if we didn't do that transition, then there would be actually this kind of punishment in every year's cash flow. So how to do it? This is actually a business case. It looks like much more favorable that you invest in this transition. You actually achieve 25% better prices. You get rid of that ETS cost that is coming up in early 2030s. Who are the customers? Car manufacturers, for example, Volvo and other companies are now looking for carbon-free steel. They have already, I know that SSAB have already reservations for that. And then the roles. Of course, the renewable energy production producers producing hydrogen. There are companies that are interested to do this. Then Gasgrid Finland, their role is actually hydrogen pipeline and the rock storage. And SSAB Rahe conversion to hydrogen reduction and changes in the production. And if you look at this, they all actually mean that the Finnish government has a position here. Gasgrid is 100% owned by Finnish government, and then SSAB and LKAB, I remember, are the main owners of SSAB. So it's Swedish government and Finnish government are owners. So if you invest in this kind of transition, you actually get better return on that investment than if you did not do that, then it looks very bad. So in 2032, it looks very bad. And if you look at this, how fast this can be done, it takes years. So we haven't even started planning this kind of setup yet, but if we did start it and did start planning and then also building later on that, then we have a question that how fast we can do it. Is it in 2030 or 32 that we can actually achieve this? It's doable to my mind, but we have to start now. And this is a drawing on map, so how it would actually happen. It is, you have those wind farms or solar farms all together, producing hydrogen there at site, and then putting it into the pipelines. And then there is the storage, and hydrogen reduction would be done in SSAB at Rahe. It could be also that somebody is actually transferring that electricity nearer and then producing hydrogen there. But this is the question that needs to be calculated through. So there are many options how to do it and what's the best way. It's still open. So how do you do it profitably? That's the way to do it. Then we go into chemical industry transition, which is, as I said, more complicated. It's 10 times bigger, and it's also actually chained into actions. And we are talking about Case Porvoo, Neste and Borealis, which are the biggest companies there. As I said in the previous slide, the demand of electricity or the capacity of electrolyzers would be 600 continuous megawatts. This is 8,000. So more than 10 times bigger altogether. And the demand of electricity in energy is 68 terawatt hours compared to the previous one, which was about 5. So this is more than 10 times bigger case altogether. And there have been discussions in many different ways, but it looks very obvious that the solution is that the conversion of Neste's production to RFNOB fuels, which are already regulated to come to the markets in 2030. There's a blending rule. It would happen to methanol to olefin route. So methanol is the raw material, then you produce olefins, which are the raw materials to fuels and plastics and many other chemicals. And if you look at the numbers, that 8,068 terawatt hours transfer of electricity to, for example, Porvoo, it's not the question. It's not really reality. Why to transfer electricity throughout the whole country? Why not produce actually these methanols at the sites where you can produce this electricity locally and you can do the methanol locally based on the bio-CO2 emissions that are coming from the pulp mills. And then methanol is easy to transport. You can put it on rail, you can put it in ships, and there's already now a market for that green methanol. So you can sell it also to the markets. But the size of the electricity production corresponds about 3,200 6-megawatt wind turbines. So this is huge. And you can't put it in one area. So you need to actually put it around Finland in places where you are able to produce electricity and then transport that electricity near to these pulp mills. Olefin I mentioned, but that's something that we don't have, not in Finland, not in Europe. I have the next slide on that. But we would actually need that 68 terawatt hours electricity and more than 8 million tons of CO2, which means that it's about the quantity of bio-CO2 produced by about 3 to 4 pulp mills. So it's a huge amount of CO2, bio-CO2 converted into methanol. If you look at the impact, here I made this. Actually, if we change it to methanol and we sold it out, or we use it as fuels in Finland, we would actually change our trade balance at least by 9 billion euros. So instead of buying that fuel into Finland, we would actually sell it or use it, and we would change it so that that money comes to Finland in one way or the other. We would reduce ETS emission by 7%, and then if we did this all, it's exactly the same figure that about 500 million emission cost would be reduced from the production of those companies. But this takes more than 10 years. You can see it quite easily. It is huge change. As I said, SSAB could be done in that 7 years, so that could actually fit that timetable 2032, but this won't. Please. Yeah.
One question there about the scope. So when you have those volumes, do you assume that the production stays the same? And now
do those numbers assume that the production volumes stay the same as currently there, or would you take into account the current plans that, for instance, in Neste's case have been published, that the size of the operation would be quite dramatically lower when we do the transition to fossil-free feedstocks?
Well, those are the figures that Neste has told out, and I was listening also in Düsseldorf when we were there a few weeks ago, what was their strategy, but it was very mixed strategy to my mind. Very difficult to say what happens and what are the volumes, but these are just examples. They are actually producing or using 10 million tons of raw material oil today. So we're talking about 6.1 million tons of methanol. So it's lower figure already. But still saying that if we want to have that kind of industry in Finland, we need to do changes. And if we look at the customers, of course, we have Finnish customers like Finnair, kerosene, and then we have shipping methanol. So the customers are there. They have been already regulated, so the market is there. The question is how fast actually the first comers can go into the markets. And the roles, again, Neste is state-owned mostly. We are talking about production of olefins. There is not such, not in Finland, but not in Europe either. That's something that needs to be done in Europe. I'm coming to that on the next slide. of course, Fingrid constructing and ensuring that the electricity needed in those places where it could be produced around the Finland, and then helping the methanol production with CO2 capture. One company, it's state-owned, partly at least, which is Stora Enso. So you can again have an impact in that you would invest in that company to produce CO2 and go for this route. And of course, if fuel use is thinner, they are filling 1 million tons of kerosene in Finland and another 1 million ton outside of Finland. That's actually a good customer also in this. Okay, on map. This is the facts that we have. You can see those green slides, the parts of the slides or the rounds. That's bio-CO2 production. So the majority of the bio-CO2 is actually in the southeastern Finland, maybe in Karelia, some in there, center Finland, in Jyväskylä area, and some in Kemi. But majority is on the eastern side. And in order to actually produce that eastern side only to methanol, it would require 78 terawatt hours. I'm coming to that figure later. But then if this is happening, then we have to start sort of capturing of the CO2 in different plants and then also transferring it to methanol. So it means that we need to have new investments into methanol in places where we use the electricity to produce the hydrogen and then do the methanol conversions. And methanol, as I said, there's a market. You can actually sell it to the markets. It's easy to transport. You can ship it to Europe. You can ship it to other places in the world. So it's available. So green methanol is a product which has a market. That's the first step. The next step is the more complicated part because there is no such thing as olefin production. But you have to do that kind of plant if you want to use methanol as sort of raw material in here. And obviously it could be near Porvoo if Kemira if Borealis and Neste, for example, are existing there already. So there would be a very short distances to use that. This slide tells about the methanol. So it's a coming paper, but methanol to olefins has the biggest sort of potential in the world. And it shows also that it goes into very different, many different products, propylene, ethylene, routes to whatever. So there is a market also in green methanol actually going to this. The big issue here is, as I said, there is no such olefin production in Europe. That way. Not in Europe, but in China they built 16 of those since 2011. So what does it mean? That we're talking about dependencies on China, but they are actually doing this thing so that they can actually change the production. At the moment they do it on fossil-based, they can change it to the green, and then they come under the CBAM regulation to Europe, and our own industry is actually still doing the old ways, and it's costing them the ETS cost. So this is a suicide route if we don't do anything here. So the last part, as I said, this is not a simple case. How do we do the security issues then affordably so that we can solve the issue? We have the problem in Finland that almost half of the Finland is restricted from wind power production. And we call it Route 5, which is going from Mikkeli to Kuopio on the right-hand side and the eastern side. There are no wind farms. And wind is the main issue that we need to have. So production of wind electricity is the key issue. And all the CO2, majority, half of the CO2 is in the eastern part of Finland. So the case is that how do we actually solve this problem? And it's not only about Finland. But anyway, we can do it. First of all, how to do it? Utilize wind farms as sort of platforms for security rather than sort of restrictions for security. So build up a chain of wind farms, and I'm saying that it's about 1,000 wind turbines there, 10 different wind farms along the eastern side, then actually address them with what you call sensors, passive sensors. Let's say in 10% of the wind farms, wind turbines, on top of the wind turbine, you would have a sensor that could actually collect information from the eastern part, or eastern side of Finland, meaning Russia. And if we look at that, instead of trying to do it separately, here we would have a platform where there is already a road, there is maintenance, there's electricity, and there's automation skills, so people can do those things. And it would actually improve the radar view, because from 200 meters you could see actually much lower than at the moment where the radars are, and then you could also see the low-flying targets. And with that number of different sensors, you could actually build much better coverage of visibility. Okay, if we go into the system and electricity, it would generate about 20 terawatt hours of electricity. So in order to actually produce methanol out of the eastern part of bio-CO2, additional 50 terawatt hours could be easily built then on the western side of that, because there is already this chain of detection and surveillance on the eastern part. So that would actually then fulfill the demand of eastern part of the CO2 production into methanol. But this is not on a Finnish issue. It's also actually European issue. It's EU issue. If you look at the border, it's from Norway to Black Sea, more or less. And we have the same problem in every area nearby the border, that it can't actually do these investments in energy production, which is then the source of wealth in those areas. So the whole eastern border of Europe is actually restricted from the wealth. It's not distributed now evenly. And as I said, this area is actually representing the size of Belgium, Netherlands and Portugal together only in Finland. So this eastern part of the Road 5 is about the same size as 3 countries in whole Europe. So this is not a small issue, but it is a big issue. And if the poverty comes to eastern part of the Finland, I think it's a big security issue. And if Ukraine is joining EU, then we get another 1,300 kilometers of eastern border with Russia. So this is also an issue that we should somehow solve. So all these things are actually coming together. You can produce this, make this transition profitably. You can actually secure the issues so that it's not costing a lot. Actually, there was a report that it would cost about 600 to 900 million with the present way of doing things to do the same thing in Finland, but I can say that this could be much cheaper. Okay, conclusions. We need a strategy. We need to put those steps in place, that what we are doing, where we are doing, and we can see that the Finnish state has a role. Oh, that happened quickly. And the steps needed are very fast, big. So it means that we don't have very much time. If we talk about years, we talk about plus or minus 10 years. So this free emission allocations, allowances, is ending up 2032. So it becomes a cost to the production that hasn't actually got rid of that. And if we do the security in a new way, we can actually realize it quite cheaply and in a completely new way. Very difficult to destroy and much more reliable. And profitably, we become also a climate pioneer. We can do that. As I said, all these business cases are profitable if you just calculate by simple figures. And I say also that Finland and Sweden are in the same boat. We have pretty similar sort of countries. We have pretty similar structures in our industries. We should work together. And as together, we are actually much bigger from an energy production point of view in Europe than we are from the size of the population. So thank you.
Thank you, Petteri, for illustrating your vision on what would be one possible pathway for a clean, competitive, sustainable industry in Finland. Clearly, we can see that the electricity production potential from renewables is one of those factors. The so-called biogenic carbon dioxide that is abundant is another one. And then it ends up into the discussion of the value chains and so on and so forth. Now let's move forward, and I'm going to invite our two commentators to join Petteri to the podium. Jukka and Simo, please. So we do have now these two prepared comments to everything that we heard by our invited guest speakers. We actually didn't agree who would be first, but shall we just go in order, and Jukka, you would be the first to analyze or assess how does it look like for your organization and in your perspective.
Thank you, Ismo, and good afternoon for everyone. So I'm Jukka Leskela, I represent Finnish Energy. We are an association of companies having energy activities in Finland in electricity generation or transmission, distribution or sales, or district heating or gas in the gas markets. And it's always lovely to listen Petteri's at the same time visionary views, but very concrete views on how and holistic views on how Finland could build on the resources that we have, namely our natural resources, on existing industry and our opportunities to scale up clean electricity generation tremendously. I will start by introducing a bit, because I know that all the audience is not Finnish actually, so I tell a little bit where we come from and what's the situation in Finland and why we at the moment are a very attractive country for industrial investments. First of all, Finland is a very energy intensive country. We have a lot of process industry in our country that's consuming a lot of electricity. We are consuming about 2.5 times as much electricity per capita than the European Union average. We don't have any fossil fuel resources in our country. No gas, no coal, no oil. So we have been a poor energy country, and now we are claiming that we are a very rich energy country at the moment. Potentially rich, at least we have resources. So the whole story of industrialization and welfare of Finland used to be importing fossil energy to Finland and generating goods for the world markets from our natural resources, namely forests and minerals and so on. While doing this, we have imported a lot of energy. The role of Russia has been very, very big in the imports. And still in 2022, just before Russia attacked Ukraine, Finland imported about 1/3 of our primary energy from Russia. All kinds of energy: electricity, coal, oil, gas, nuclear fuel, bioenergy, and so on. At the moment, we don't import energy from Russia at all. So we have phased out the imports. We also used to be very we imported big share of our electricity at that time, about 20 or 25% annually we imported of our electricity. Now we have increased our capacity so much that we produce almost the amount of electricity that we use in Finland nowadays. Last year, only 4% of our electricity was from fossil fuels. So 96% was something else than fossil-based production. We have wind, about 20%, hydro 20%, nuclear 40%, and bio something between 10 and 15%, and then miscellaneous in addition to that. So our electricity is now changed a lot. We don't import that much anymore, and it's carbon neutral already. And by the end of this decade, within a few years only, also the space heating in Finland will be carbon neutral. So we are phasing out fossil fuels also in space heating. So we will be probably one of the first countries in Europe to have both electricity and heating carbon neutral by 2030. By doing this, we have the second lowest electricity price in Europe in the wholesale markets, meaning for the industrial customers. Sweden's has been a little bit cheaper, but together, Finland and Sweden, we have competitive prices for electricity for industry in electricity, also compared with China and USA. And this is in a strong contradiction with the Draghi report stating that energy in Europe is 2 or 3 times as high, as expensive as in USA and China. Actually, electricity here in Finland and Sweden is competitive for industry, even if you count USA and China. So we have carbon neutral electricity, which is competitive, and we can increase the amount of that electricity tremendously. So that is the reason why there is a lot of interest in investing in carbon neutral electricity intensive industries in Finland. There are a lot of plans for that, and of course now is the question how to make this as reality. And there is potential to develop new products and new businesses like Petteri said, but also to transform our existing process industry and to a carbon neutral future. So there are these kind of opportunities, and how we see it in Finnish energy, if we considering on European-wide level, we had about the same amount of emissions in our electricity systems since about 15 years ago than Europe has on average at the moment. So we have made the transformation, and we believe that it's possible for whole Europe to transform the energy system carbon neutral. It is a matter of what to do and how to do. And there is a little bit of question in Europe at the moment, in some areas and in some stakeholders in some countries, that while we have now a little bit challenges in our competitiveness and in our economy in Europe, should we slow down with the decarbonization? Our experience, though, is that the electricity is the cheapest in countries who has the least amount of fossil fuels in their systems and who have the best electricity and most functional electricity markets in their areas, namely in Nordics and in Iberia. So the answer would be likely the opposite. Speed up the transformation, get rid of the fossil fuels, they will only create new dependencies if you start buying from new routes, speed up the decarbonisation and come to the same path to create clean and competitive Europe. Then about the European Union competitiveness a little bit. It is a fact that the competitiveness of European industry is at a rather bad shape at the moment. And it's highly important that we develop strategies and take action on improve the competitiveness of European industry. But it should create real competitiveness. I've been a little bit have concerns on many of the proposals to set import duties or taxes for foreign products, or subsidize existing industries who have challenges in their competitiveness. Subsidies and import duties, they don't create real competitiveness at all. They may help shortly in a relative competitiveness in our own domestic markets in Europe, but they don't create any competitiveness at all. And we should make, I don't want to say that we don't need any of these duties or subsidies. They may be, have their role in some specific cases, but this is certainly not the answer for the European competitiveness. I have been surprised that the investments in clean power in Europe are lagging, while the power prices are very high. When the prices are high, normally in the markets, somebody wants to invest in generation. In Finland and Sweden, though, we have invested tremendously in wind power during last years, even if we have the lowest prices in the markets. Why is that? We don't have any subsidies, we don't have any auctions by the governments. It is an open market to invest. And I believe that more auctions for the renewables or more subsidies for renewables is not an answer. The answer is somewhere that create opportunities to invest in renewables, improve the grid, speed up the licensing, and make land use planning so that it is possible to find places for renewables. And this all is lacking, and we should concentrate on issues that we can really do. Not all issues are made only by the European Commission and European institutions. Many of these can be done nationally, and the countries should start doing these things. What we need from the governments and from the European Union is still a lot. We are doing industrial investments for the first time in industrial scale in many processes. There is certainly a lot of risk in these investments, and we need governments to carry these investments. We need governments to take care that the infrastructure, in the energy infrastructure and both other infrastructure is such that it's good for industry to invest. We need to create knowledge for this and educate our people for making this transformation and so on. So there is a lot of role for government. But there is a lot of question of how much subsidies we can give to some companies or something like that. This should not be the focus. The focus is to make the market work. We also need Europe to create markets for the products, the green products. We need political markets to speed up and make the demand for the products. So there is a big role for Europe. There is a big role for individual member states. But the answer is that we should create markets and make the investment environment very good for the industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Jukka, for putting. Thank you, Jukka, for making the case so clear on several aspects. That the obvious thing, of course, but sometimes we tend to forget it, that decarbonisation is indeed the best vaccination for the competitiveness or lack of competitiveness disease, and that the systematic work to promote integration and decarbonisation and green power does pay off. Now, before we move to Simo's comments, I'm going to ask one question from Jukka that you don't need to answer now, but you can think about it. And I'm using my my position as chair, but I would also like you to reflect on the numbers that were presented by Petteri on the potential that we see. More than 1,000 terawatt hours being produced potentially in the near future. How does that look from your perspective? We do know that you have your own 2040 roadmap. Of course, there is also the chicken and egg issue on whether you first have offer or demand and so on. But I would like to challenge you on that regard as well. And obviously, we're going to have questions that the participants can ask. But let's move forward, and Simo, your turn.
Thank you. Simo Säynevirta from global technology company ABB, and what I do there, I'm heading a green electrification ecosystem program with which we develop technologies that enable this transition that we were talking about here. But then today I'm here as a chair of Hydrogen Cluster Finland, which was formed just 3 years ago by the industry to take a lead in driving this transition for Finland. We started with a little over 30 companies joining forces, and then the number of industry associations from the beginning were part of the setup. But today we have very rapidly grown to be a get-together of over 100 companies, actually 108 at the moment. And we are very actively participating in the dialogue as well as concretely driving these developments forward for Finland. If I reflect a little bit kind of on what we heard from Petteri and Jukka earlier, and then put it in a context of Europe at the moment, really look at it from that angle, and ask ourselves a question that, is it possible to actually build a free and industrious, in other words, competitive Europe in this current situation? We've been asking ourselves this question very heavily, and then the conclusion is that actually that is, like we heard already, it is actually quite doable. So we can make this transition happen, and it can also be not just kind of let's say somehow supported by subsidies so that we can so and so make it, but it can actually become a very good business. So that's our conclusion of it. And so we have to kind of take the fundamentals again and start building as if we were in the day one here. And if you reflect kind of where did the European Union start? It was after the Second World War, and as we all know, it's a peace project. So how to avoid kind of that Europeans fight each other, have wars in Europe, and it was formed as a steel and coal union. So it was based on kind of concrete industrial activity, and steel and coal were the ingredients there. I think the same logic applies today, but we want to get rid of the coal. So that would be kind of what we need to do. And there, if you then look at kind of why do we need hydrogen in this equation, our argument is that okay, if we replace now coal with clean hydrogen and this renewable clean energy electricity, there we do have the ingredients to rethink the system. But in order to do it in such a way that it's competitive, I think we also need to accept the fact that things will change. If you think about where do we have today the heavy industry, where do we have the steel mills? They're actually on top of those coal mines where we had the abundant cheap energy and the coal as a reduction agent for iron be readily available. And now we continue kind of, in our current thinking, I think we are still in that modus that nothing would change. We just make this switch to clean energy. But we could continue pretty much the same way we have been there before. We were meeting with some hydrogen colleagues from another Central European country, and they had a nice hydrogen valley development there, where they were looking, actually, they were heavy process industry, and they had pilot projects about the decarbonisation ongoing, some small electrolyzers being implemented to produce green hydrogen. And then at some point somebody asked in the room that, how do you think to get the kind of, where do you get this hydrogen in here in order to reduce the iron with green hydrogen? And then the answer was that, yeah, that's a very good question. So I think in our modus of how we think about this is that we are still stuck in that the kind of industry need to work in the same logic. We just do a little bit of supporting of the transition and everything will be fine. But I think the end result is going to be not competitive if we don't get over that mental hurdle. And in concrete terms, that what would it mean in Europe? It would actually mean that we have to rethink the roles. So where do we do what? Who is going to do what? How do we redesign the value chains so that we can still have prosperous, high-value manufacturing in Central Europe? But do I need to kind of make the steel there next to my car factory? I don't think we need. So we need to kind of accept the fact that there are going to be now that heavy industry actually going to where it originally landed based on these fossil rules. But now, today, actually, the conclusion will be that heavy industry, refining that requires a lot of affordable clean hydrogen or clean energy in the first place, that will locate to places where we do have that. And that in Europe means that it is actually the Nordic countries, Finland particularly, as well as the Iberian Peninsula in the southern Europe. So that's my first message. We need to accept the fact that these value chains need to be rethought, and when we do so, then it has to be done in such a way that already what Jukka was talking about, that we have to be very careful that these mechanisms that we have in there that are supporting the transition, they will favor the most competitive players. So if you have a project that is making a transition and it is from business case point of view the most competitive, it should win in the auction of the subsidies, for instance. So what do we need hydrogen for? That would be the other. There's a debate ongoing about that. Okay, is it just electrification? Can we do everything with electricity, or is there still room for hydrogen? Or was it a bubble? Actually, in Europe, I was last week in European Hydrogen Week, and there was a common consensus that it's quite a depressed situation in Europe at the moment regarding those projects. But I think, again, if you look at kind of what are the fundamentals, so how do we make the clean steel, low carbon steel, or if we were to decarbonize the chemical industry and we don't anymore have an option of using the fossil coal, I think clean hydrogen plays a key role for us to enable the circulation of the carbon in the atmosphere. And then, okay, Petteri was already talking about the methanol, but I think in the future, because we still want to continue using on those goods that are based on carbon being in the equation, we have to have clean hydrogen to marry with CO2, for instance, or then if we were to still have agriculture produce food for us, and we need the fertilizers. Okay, ammonia still needed, and in that context, it is nitrogen married with hydrogen that you produce ammonia with. And right now, actually, we import most of that, either fertilizers or ammonia, out of Russia. So that would also be a security that we have to think in there. So hydrogen would be needed in these sectors to decarbonize the hard-to-abate sectors. But then it also would have another role in this transition, and that has to do with how the energy system works when it is now dominated by renewable green electricity. What will change is that we will have a lot more fluctuation in the power in the system. So how much we get electricity into the system in one moment, and then in the next moment when we have wind standing still or sun not shining, we don't have any power coming in. And these power fluctuations, they will be much larger than what we have had traditionally in a fossil-based electricity system. Just to put it in perspective, if we were to build up all the electricity generation that we have projects for here in Finland. Fingrid has these connection inquiries to the system, which amount to over 400 gigawatts of generation. And if we today look at kind of what is the total amount of electricity generation in Finland, it's in the league of 20 gigawatts. So it's like 20 times larger fluctuation that is going to take place. And if we just use electricity for these, for instance, electricity grids to take all that electricity where we need to consume it, it will be a mission impossible to do. And hydrogen plays a key role there because we can use hydrogen production as a key flexibility in the electricity system, and then hydrogen, like Petteri already was talking about, as a storage. So if we have a steel maker that want to run the steel plant continuously, what they don't need kind of continuous clean electricity in the same amount, but they need actually baseload hydrogen to run that production. So hydrogen plays that type of a role as well. And in order to do that, then, okay, it actually calls for a lot of new technology as well. And I think we need to be conscious about that as well. We have to, in Europe, lead the way how we build this system in such a way that it can manage this new complexity that we are talking about. So to summarize, Finland is really the natural starting point. When we built the free and industrious Europe, we have the abundant clean resources, like we heard. We have the connecting critical industry and technical capability to build these new novel systems. And then the society is stable. We can also use this transition to enhance the security of the society going forward. Thank you.
So thank you, Simo, for that, I would say, rather upbeat view on the potential, and reminding us that even if there are hiccups, and there are certainly some at the global stake who are wishing to turn the clock backwards, but what you say about the fundamentals are there. The need for hydrogen reduction steel is there. The need for the chemical industry decarbonized feedstock is there. The need for strategic autonomy, getting rid of our dependencies, is there. The issue of storage, I mean, I think you tick all the right boxes in making your case. Now, I do have that reserve question for Jukka, and it might serve as an icebreaker when we move to the Q&A. But I would like to first, if somebody wants to ask anything right now, to ask the question here in the room or in the chat. And if not, then we break the ice with my additional challenge to Jukka. None? Okay, so let's get started. On the numbers, how do they sound like?
Well, we have a bit of an opposite starting point with Petteri. Petteri explained the potential that our country has. So, and of course, his point is that capability of producing clean electricity is not a bottleneck for the industrial opportunities for our country. We have also made, as you said, we have also, with Finnish Energy, we have also made our 2040 vision with the idea that Finland would be the European champion of this energy transition and have these industrial investments here. And there we end up much smaller figures by 2040. In any case, tremendous growth in electricity generation in Finland, maybe 2.5 or 3 times as high as today, but not tens of times as high. This is, from my perspective, not the main point. There are some issues that we need to take into account. First of all, Finland is not only made for industrial energy. Our population probably have some other ideas on what we do with our large country. So there are social and aspects and other interests for the areas. I know that Lappeenranta-Lahti University of Technology, they have tried to count these in their potential figures. Then we have also the biodiversity loss that we need to combat, and it means that now when we have moved to take all of our energy from nature, from this biosphere instead of from the fossil resources, then of course we are having some kind of a conflict with biodiversity and energy that we need to tackle and take care of. It is doable, but yet we need area also for nature, not only for people and society. So there are limitations that we cannot just enter in huge figures or so on. But the main point for me is how to get started, how to create the markets, how to have the investments here, how to run this. We are now in a phase where we have maybe the best cards that we could have in this game as a country, and we would like to play with the game, and now it seems that nobody is not willing to play the game. It's like everybody says that this is a stupid game and we don't want to do it anymore. 2 years ago everybody was entering that. So because of the higher interest rates, the inflation and the geopolitical uncertainties and all these issues, many financiers and industrial companies, they are hesitant to make their investment decisions. And now the main focus should be on how to get started, and we need to create markets, incentives for the investments, but yet we should be very, very market oriented, and the market issues and the market should be European markets instead of trying to create some very small national markets that the industries could not rely on. So we need also European regulation on how to make this happen.
Well, thank you. I think I'm afraid you generated more work for yourself because you mentioned also the word incentives on how we're going to make those incentives happening. So be prepared to tackle that question also in a moment. I did note down that I think this is going to be quite a famous one-liner, that we do have the best cards one can have but will anybody play? And I think that's a $1 trillion question. Simo, you wanted to have a follow-up on this?
Just a kind of a comment to put it in a perspective. I think what makes this hard as well, we have been living our lives in a linear world, where and energy particularly, kind of this type of fossil world, that it's been linear, it's kind of steady. Nothing changes very rapidly, and like Petteri was talking, that okay, it takes 10 years to do things. I think the challenge is that this is actually exponential development, and to put it in perspective, it's actually good to look what happens in China. Everybody knows kind of how China has as a nation overall developed in the last couple of decades. But then when you look at the renewable electricity and then the development that links now, for instance, hydrogen in this context, there are some really kind of remarkable figures that come out of China. So first of all, solar power, kind of how you generate now solar panels. There is soon capacity that is of 1,000 gigawatts of new solar panels to be produced with a very affordable price and then shipped anywhere in the world. So actually overcapacity in that. But then what that leads to is that the expansion is actually very, very rapid. There was one data point that was saying that now China installed and connected to the grid 143 gigawatts worth of solar generation this year from January to August. And the outlook is like 200 gigawatts generation. And then when you remember, Finland is 20 gigawatts all generation ever installed. Or like this 143 gigawatts, that was actually more than cumulatively the United States has ever installed. This development in China is on an exponential path already. And then when you look at then the technology development, so when we talk about kind of, for instance, now hydrogen being too expensive here in Europe, and that's because those equipment are too expensive. The economies of scale, they come also to affect the technology learning curves. And where you have a market where things get built, when you can actually optimize these things, it will create the kind of a positive cycle that these things get better and better. And after a while, when you are on this exponential curve, there's no way anybody can catch you up. And now I think Europe is a little bit in that situation right now, that if we are hesitant here, and we now keep on thinking for a couple of next years, and we are in this linear mindset that we just, okay, perhaps in 10 years something would happen, there's no way we can catch up China going forward. So it is actually rather urgent for us now to figure this out, that how do we get things happening and how do we start building these things and do that in an exponential scale. So rather than taking 10 years, how would we do it in 1 year?
And that indeed, I think, was one of the key remarks by Mario Draghi in his report. He was asking in his presentation on his report on whether the EU is going to remain or try to be a technological leader, or whether we're going to do our green transition by using technology from China. And I think these are some of the fundamental issues that we really need to consider. I know that Petteri has a follow-up on this, but I'm also looking at the whole. There are no questions in the chat either, so let's take Petteri and then we take the incentives issue.
Yeah, I tried to make a point here that this transition takes quite a long time. I tried to make a point that we have to think about those investments as profitable investments into businesses. So it's not a general sort of thinking, but if you generalize it, it works the same way in the whole Europe. And you have to do the business calculation in different places in different ways. The cost of energy is actually the key element there. And therefore, I think Finland has a great opportunity, but we have to start somewhere. And if we look at the government can actually invest in SSAB as an owner. They can invest also in this hydrogen grid, and the storage is as a 100% owner of gas grid, and they can then also take some of the risks if necessary. But the business case is good because you're getting money on your investment rather than subsidizing something. And this is something, the attitude that we should somehow find, that let's make good business cases where if the government is carrying the risk by investing into that, then the return is coming also to the governments. So that's sort of my point. And there is this carrot and whip. If this is the carrot that you can actually put money into profitable investments, the whip is that when you don't do that, then you get bad punishment there.
Well, fortunately, we have at least one civil servant listening to you on what would be the role of the government. Now, let's move forward the issue of incentives. How do we create those incentives? Well, I think we are getting to the heart center of the topic.
Yeah. So if we discuss on the European level, first of all, I think what we have done during the last years have been that we have had some crises, and then we have opened funding in order to survive these crises. First the pandemic, and then the energy price crisis caused by the Russian attack to Ukraine. That has been good. It has been necessary because we had this crisis. Now, this is not a crisis. This is a transformation. This is an opportunity. So we should do something different. The problem is that many countries still consider that we have the same crisis. So that the state aid regulation is not followed as it should be. So the countries are allowed to distribute money, and the European Union was not founded for this. It was founded for fair competition, internal market, common rules, and so on. So now, how to incentivize is it's certainly that if we want to speed up investments, of course, we need to tackle the issue of financing the investments. All of these investments are hugely capital intensive. So anything that can take the risk from the financer or the investor would be welcome. It doesn't mean that give $1 billion and do the investment. It's something else to de-risk the investments. And then it should be strategic. It should create European competitiveness. We should select on in which areas we want to improve and go forward. And there we should have programs that don't just deliver first the money to all countries and then try to do the same in all countries with the money or some other things, but it should be competitive, the aid, so that the best ideas in the most important areas would go on. But it's something else as well. It's speeding up the licensing. There are very good proposals on that, and I know that it's not in the European Union's hands only. It's mostly national. But we need to speed up in licensing and land use planning and all these things in order to make this competitive. And one issue still is that during the last Commission period and the last 5 years, we have made tremendously detailed legislation, and all the time it's getting more and more complicated to make the investments for the companies because the legislation is so detailed. If we want to create markets, it's we cannot regulate it dead before it's born. So we should encourage the market. If we want to have a hydrogen market, we need to generate hydrogen first and have the market, and maybe regulate a little bit less on which specific conditions the hydrogen is produced and for which specific purposes on which specific hour of the day. So this kind of regulation is killing the market instead of getting it started.
Wow. Word is free. I think we all appreciate also your analytical messages, and I think that those will be studied carefully. But what I take in of this is that we have to be really careful not to, as you say, not to kill the market instead of creating it and get the balance right. I've used my 2 questions, but there's one question in the chat at least.
Yeah. What do the speakers think of the current difficulties related to the wind energy or battery sections? Seems like it will be even more difficult to present this as a good business case.
Well, thanks. I think that's a very good and very actual and relevant question. Who wants to take this?
Can you still repeat? So wind and battery, what?
What do the speakers think of the current difficulties related to the wind energy or the battery sector?
Now I don't know whether this is referring to the industries that are generating the battery industry generation in Europe and wind power technology development in Europe. Probably so, because yes. So I'm not a specialist on these industrial sectors in the technology industries, but it's obvious that what I have understood from the wind industry is that the wind industry in Europe has a little bit lost the competitiveness, and there may be some unfair competition from other countries, but I would say that the solution must be found from within the industry, how to improve the generation and so on. So. To be competitive. There has been also a little bit of lack of demand in Europe for this industry, and that is because of generally too low investment pace for wind, especially on shore for a number of years now, and there. I think that the governments could help in land use planning and licensing and so on, and opening the market. Now there is a lot of national auctioning, which is sometimes very slow process in getting things done. You probably can answer on battery side, maybe better.
Yes. Okay, now it works. Yeah, so batteries actually is a very good case in the point, and you can then extrapolate to hydrogen. It works exactly the same way. Actually, what has happened in batteries is that it's an integrated play. So the big demand started when electric vehicles started taking off, and now if you look at what has happened in China, which is the largest car market in the world. The Chinese manufacturers, they figured out that in traditional combustion engines, you couldn't ever catch up kind of 100 years of tradition from Western manufacturers. But then when it comes to the electric vehicles, it's a new game. And then when you have kind of an integrated value chain viewpoint, you have a very large captive market where you have a lot of demand for those vehicles with electric batteries in them. And so in other words, demand for batteries, then you get the booming industry building up those batteries. And then once you have that going, again, the technology learning curves kick in. So all of a sudden you have not only kind of cheap batteries that somebody has subsidized, but actually you are a technology leader developing the next generation industry. And that has in batteries in fact happened. So the best technology is being developed today in China, and then leadership in innovation is there up to the level that I just saw CATL chairman getting comments to Elon Musk about that Elon Musk can't make batteries. So from that point of view, kind of there is this type of a development. But in hydrogen, actually, what I was referring to earlier, go back to that who is going to build up these things in massive volumes will have an advantage of the technology learning curve, and that's we see the same development in hydrogen. So if you look at the electrolyzers, which are the hydrogen production machinery, most of the top 10 largest manufacturers, they are right now from China, and they're growing very rapidly based on this domestic market that you can see there. So in that sense, kind of they go hand in hand, and then who is kind of on this learning curve further on will have an upper hand, and it will be if you lose your competitiveness, it will be damn hard to actually catch up. So from that point of view, it only emphasizes that we don't have time to waste in Europe in this.
Yeah, I think there are plans and initiatives indeed to catch up, and as you said, time will be of essence in this for us in the EU. There's one question from Apo. I think we can take two more.
Thank you. My name is Apo Pukarinen. I'm working here at the representation. Not necessarily a question. Thank you very much for the very good remarks and insight as well. We know that we have the forthcoming clean industrial deal coming at latest in March 10th. So our colleagues in Brussels, they are drafting the plan already, and I guess we will be continuing hopefully the discussion after that. But just to comment, it's very interesting the remarks on right incentives, taking it to the context of decreasing the regulatory burden, which is has been creating hurdles for companies in many sectors, and finding the right balance, as you rightly put. But what we all know, and I know you know perfectly well, but just to say that setting the right long-term targets, that is what everybody needs, the investors, all players. Well, I think it is on our responsibility to do that, set the right long-term targets. Then the investments will follow, because there is certainty. So just saying this, that when the clean industrial deal, we have that, that will be actually, I think that's the strategy, and then the regulation on that will follow, and the lobbying works continues as well. So I think it will be a 5 year, the whole Commission term task to do for all of us.
Thank you. Let's take one last remark if there's anything. Was there anything in chat? There's one in chat.
So the question is it more likely to solve the supply-demand balance challenge by finding supplementing low-carbon electricity sources to wind power, or by developing flexible electrolyzers?
A very technical one. All hands up. Who was first?
Well, I can add, it's neither of those, actually. So we are talking about production with the production of electricity, production of hydrogen. But actually what will matter in the end is that do you have demand for what you make out of it? And I think that actually we were talking about these what are the right incentives. The key conclusion of the European Hydrogen Week last week was that actually what need to be looked into is that how do we get the demand going? So how would we have the sustainable aviation fuel in need? How do we have the green ammonia for fertilizers? How do we have low carbon steel being perhaps mandated? And then once that's there, it will then kind of pull the production. So then you make hydrogen to make the low carbon steel, and then of course I'm a true believer in a market economy. So if there's a more better way of making clean electricity than the current renewable sources, by all means. But then it should be so that we don't actually decide upfront that it's now fusion power that is the solution for everything, but rather look at that, okay, when we have these new competitors on the block, who then wins in the competition is the winner.
I don't disagree at all, but I have a different answer. Our analysis from our vision for 2040 on hydrogen was that no significant hydrogen economy can evolve if the hydrogen generation itself cannot be flexible. So it's obvious that the value of the power is very different in different times, and that follows that everybody who uses a lot of electricity creates a lot of value if it can be flexible, and if not, it will be too expensive. So and yet we need multiple ways of generating electricity, I believe, and there is a role also for nuclear and so on. But if you take, for example, new nuclear, it's so expensive for hydrogen clean hydrogen generation that it's not competitive, because some will develop more flexible hydrogen. And this all means that the prices and the costs of the electrolysis process itself need to come down. Otherwise, this is another issue, that if it's not coming down, then it's very expensive to run the hydrogen business.
And Petteri will wrap it up.
A simple thing is that electrolyzers have to be flexible, and they are actually, in milliseconds you can actually change the production. And when we talk about electrolyzers, everybody is thinking one electrolyzer, but if we say that we have 600 megawatts worth of electrolyzers, it means that we have probably 300 electrolyzers of 5 megawatt. So you are running a sort of fleet of electrolyzers, and you're optimizing that by running it in different sort of loads. And you can run electrolyzers from 20-25% to 100 quite fast. So this is actually the flexibility, and it has to be based on cheap, affordable electricity. When you have high prices, you have to somehow run down that electrolyzer capacity, and therefore you need those storages of hydrogen also to balance the demand.
Final remark on that actually is an area which we are very actively developing here in Finland right now. So how do we use the hydrogen provided flexibilities to balance the new energy system where renewables are the dominant source of power?
I think that's one good idea to be followed in the next 5 years. Now we are running out of time. Colleagues, if I try to sum up in very short terms what we have just heard. First, we heard that the potential is there in case of Finland for the green electricity, for the decarbonized competitive industry to move up in the decarbonized value chain ladder. We can replace the old-fashioned steel with hydrogen reduction steel. We can, up to a certain point, of course the volumes are going to be huge that will be needed, but we can start replacing the fossil feedstock of the chemical industry. We can produce as Petteri was alluding to, we can produce also those downstream products that we didn't even discuss, such as plastics and glues and paints and so on and so forth. So the potential is there, and I think this will be fitting exactly to the next Commission's mandate in terms of what Finland can offer. We also heard, I think, if I try to sum up Jukka's key points, that yes, the European institutions can play their role, and the right kind of regulation does matter a lot, but that the member states themselves can also do a lot in what comes to the speeding up permitting, land use, and other kinds of issues that demand and, of course, are in the local or international competence. And from Simo, I think we were. I would say perhaps that the key points are in terms of the absolutely fundamentals that are there to keep up in the technology race. There is no time to be wasted, and success will be breeding success. So if we start making those investments that are absolutely necessary for our industrial transformation, then those will be having the impact of the positive circle, and we can keep up in the R&D as well for the further innovation. But there doesn't seem to be too much time to wait, and the time is now. And certainly I think the whole big picture in how this relates to our management of the dependencies. Ammonia was mentioned. A lot of ammonia and fertilizers still come from one certain third country that is not very friendly with the EU these days. There are much more examples like that. All this, of course, contributes to the wider agenda of the global competitiveness of the EU, of us staying always at the highest position of that value chain ladder in the decarbonized world and strategic autonomy. So on that note, thank you for our participants here in the hall and everybody who followed us online. We will be sharing this link, the YouTube link of the web stream, in our newsletter that will be likely coming up this Thursday. It will be also in the representation's website, and Petteri's slideshow, I think, is also public, so that is available on demand as well. Jussi, you can already post it to the chat of the web stream. So thank you very much.
Thank you.